Biogeochemical cycles. Part 1, cycling in nature. Really what we can have living and growing in an ecosystem very much depends on the nutrients we have in that ecosystem and how those nutrients move around, or the cycling of those nutrients. Really, nutrients can move quickly through the atmosphere, or they could get stored for longer periods of time. When nutrients are stored in an area, that area is called a sink or a reservoir. Part 2, hydrologic and carbon cycles. So we did the water cycle, or the hydrologic cycle, in section 1. Couple things to remember. The term transpiration involves plants, right? Transpiration is water vapor evaporating off the surface of leaves. So that's transpiration. When we look at also the evaporative processes happening on just surfaces and on leaves, that term is evapotranspiration. We have runoff. When rain falls quickly and does not soak into the ground, it'll run off. Again, runoff happens a lot more where you have impervious cover, or cement, those type of things. And then we've got infiltration and percolation. Remember, in the alphabet, I comes before P, and in the water cycle, infiltration happens first. Water first soaks into the ground. Then if there's any water left that hasn't been used by soil microorganisms or plant roots, it can then percolate down and recharge our aquifer. Okay, we did the carbon cycle in our second unit. So the carbon cycle, a couple important processes. Our big reservoirs in the carbon cycle are oceans, the atmosphere, crust rocks like sedimentary rocks, and fossil fuels. Natural things that will add carbon to the atmosphere are any type of organism respiration, whether that's animal, plant, or soil microorganism, and volcanic eruptions. Those things naturally add carbon to the atmosphere. Anthropogenic, again, human-caused sources of carbon in the atmosphere. Burning fossil fuels. Oh, you can't even see my car. Burp, 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 burp. Burning fossil fuels and deforestation also add carbon to the atmosphere. The oceans are a very interesting part of the carbon cycle. Oceans absorb carbon and they release it. So the oceans are constantly absorbing and releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Naturally, photosynthesis is our only natural process to remove carbon from the atmosphere besides ocean absorption. Okay? Carbon cycle quick facts. Is there a rock reservoir in the carbon cycle? Rock reservoir! Oh yeah, there is. Is there an atmospheric component to the cycle? Yep. Carbon is found in the atmosphere. Humans, influences of man, are burning fossil fuels and deforestation. Organisms have to have carbon. It's a major building block of everything in the body. We are carbon-based life forms. All organisms depend on carbon to make their body tissues, to make glucose, to make energy, all of those things. Okay? Okay, new material now, the nitrogen cycle, part 3. The nitrogen cycle is our most complex biogeochemical cycle. There's a lot of different chemical changes that happen in the nitrogen cycle that you need to know. Okay? First of all and foremost, there is not a rock reservoir in the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycles very quickly between atmosphere, plants, soil, but no rock reservoir, meaning there is not a rock type that will hold in nitrogen. So we've got all of this nitrogen in our atmosphere. If you remember from our first unit, nitrogen is in the form of N2, this diatomic nitrogen. 71% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. However, plants cannot use this form of nitrogen, which is sort of unfortunate for them. So we've got a whole kind of set of steps. Our first step from getting nitrogen gas into a usable form is called nitrogen fixation. So nitrogen fixation, sorry, my microphone fell off. Okay, nitrogen fixation is the process of either lightning, cyanobacteria in aquatic environments, or the root nodules, so there's little lumps in the roots of certain legume plants, so your peas, your beans, soy, that fix nitrogen. That bacteria in the legume roots fix nitrogen. So step 1 of the nitrogen cycle, nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is the process of N2 gas getting converted into either ammonia, NH3, or ammonium, NH4+1. So that's nitrogen fixation, happens in those places. The second step of the nitrogen cycle is nitrification. So our ammonia and ammonium get turned by more bacteria into nitrate, NO3. Okay? Plants can uptake a little bit of ammonium, NH4, but they're not very efficient at using ammonium. Nitrate is what they really want. So again, that's nitrification. Ammonia, ammonium getting changed into nitrate. Then that nitrate is what's called assimilated into the plant, meaning taken up and put into the plant's tissues. Okay? So you've got this plant, it's like, yay, I'm alive, I've got all this nitrate, yum, 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 nitrate being assimilated into the plant, and then, oh, the plant dies, there it goes, bye-bye. So once you've got either animal waste or like pieces of plant that die, that type of thing, then the cycle continues. So you've got all this nitrate that's in these plants. Our next step is ammonification. So what ammonification does is the nitrate that's in this dead plant leaf, then will get changed back into ammonia, ammonium. So that's ammonification. Okay, decomposer bacteria do that. Okay, very important. And then last but not least, we have the process of denitrification. So that ammonia, ammonium is turned back into N2 gas, which is an atmospheric gas. We go back into the atmosphere. So quick recap, those last two steps. Ammonification happens from your decomposer bacteria, and then we have again that denitrification where you release that gas. This denitrification, our last step of the nitrogen cycle, happens only in wet environments. So denitrification will not happen in dry soils. You have to have a rain for those. There's a specialized bacteria that can act only when it's wet that will break down that last step from the this guy. So again, denitrification, ammonia, ammonium, turn into N2 gas, which goes back into the atmosphere. Okay? So recap, NF, NAD, nitrogen fixation, N2 gas in the atmosphere into ammonia, ammonium. Then we have N, nitrification, ammonia, ammonium, that is turned into nitrate that the plants can eat. Then we have ammonification, where the nitrate is turned back into ammonia, ammonium. And then we have denitrification, where the ammonia, ammonium is turned into N2 gas and goes back into the atmosphere. We have two primary impacts on the nitrogen cycle. We fix a lot of atmospheric nitrogen. The Haber process was a Nobel Prize winning process in which we started to make chemical-based fertilizers from atmospheric nitrogen. Okay? And also when we burn fossil fuels, we add a lot of nitric oxide, which is NO, to the atmosphere. And in the atmosphere, this is converted to nitrous oxide, N2O. So man influences the cycle by making fertilizer and burning fossil fuels. Nitrogen cycle, quick facts. Rock reservoir? No. No rock reservoir for the nitrogen cycle. Atmospheric reservoir? Absolutely. That's the biggest reservoir by far of nitrogen. Influences of man, making fertilizer, burning fossil fuels. Organisms have to have nitrogen to make DNA and to make proteins. You've got to have nitrogen. Okay. Section 4, the sulfur cycle. Most of our sulfur is stored in this, rocks and minerals. Sulfur cycles between rocks, atmosphere, and living organisms. Sulfur enters the atmosphere whenever we have volcanic eruptions. If you've ever been to Yosemite and you're like, oh, what's that kind of smelly smell? That's hydrogen sulfide gas, one of the several sulfur compounds that gets into the atmosphere from volcanic eruptions, from hot springs, from vents, those types of hot vents, those type of things. Any decomposition, anaerobic decomposition in aquatic environments will also release sulfur. How does sulfur get, so that's how some natural ways that sulfur gets into the atmosphere. Sulfur comes out of the atmosphere anytime it rains in the form of sulfuric acid, which is acid rain. Plants absorb sulfate through their roots, and sulfur is an essential component of proteins. Now, important point, humans absolutely influence the sulfur cycle, but if you just write by burning fossil fuels, that's going to be incorrect, because what happens when we burn natural gas, when we burn regular gasoline in our cars, that actually does not release sulfur. When we burn this stuff, whoa, it's cool! When we burn coal, that releases sulfur. Also, when we refine oil and gas, we refine it to take out the sulfur compounds so that when we do burn gasoline in our cars, the sulfur isn't in there anymore. So just writing burning fossil fuels, no bueno. Writing burning coal, bueno. Writing refining oil, bueno. Okay? Quick facts on the sulfur cycle. Rock reservoir, heck yeah, heck yeah. Atmospheric components, oh yeah. And influences of man, burning coal, refining oil and gas. And organisms have to have it as an essential component of many proteins. Section 5, our last cycle for today, the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus cycles through the crust and Earth's organisms. There is no atmospheric component to the phosphorus cycle. It is our slowest cycle because when things cycle through the atmosphere, that helps them move very rapidly. But they're most of our phosphorus is locked up in either organisms or rocks or ocean bottom sediments. So phosphorus gets out of our rocks and minerals when it rains. Basically, when it rains, the water runs over the rocks and weathers the rock a little bit, and some of the phosphorus comes out. Phosphorus in organisms is used for the phosphate backbone of DNA, for ATP, and in bones and teeth of vertebrate animals. Phosphorus is very often the limiting both plant and aquatic plant mineral. Why? Because it's, again, a lot of times locked up in rocks. How do humans get phosphate? We need it as fertilizer for our crops. So we'll mine the phosphate-containing rock and grind it up and then fertilize our fields. This is primarily how humans interrupt the phosphorus cycle. We take a lot of phosphate rock that would have been sequestered for several million years and make it bioavailable. We grind it up and put it into the ecosystem as it runs off our crop fields. Okay, quick review, phosphorus cycle, rock reservoir, yes! Atmospheric component, no! Influence of man, we mine that phosphate rock, grind it up, and fertilize our fields. Organisms need it for bones and teeth and DNA. Very important, quick little helpful hint. Plants. So this is really all these cycles are really about plants, right? Kind of our producer base of our food webs. Plants uptake minerals best in their 8 form. So when we talk about our 8 form, what do I mean? I mean phosphate, PO4. I mean nitrate, NO3. I mean phosphate, I said phosphate. I mean sulfate, SO4. So I always say plants ate their nutrients. Haha, I ate my nutrients. Plants need phosphate, nitrate, and sulfate. Plants cannot absorb just plain old N, just plain old nitrogen, just plain old P, plain old phosphorus. It has to be in that more bioavailable form of that polyatomic ion.